We continue to follow breaking news. Amanda, it's been, what, about an hour now since all the news about Nick Saban? A little less than that?
I don't know, because it still feels so new.
It does.
I think you're right. It has been about an hour, but it's just
I don't know if the shock is settled in is what I'm trying to get at, right?
No,
because it's still
not at all. Not at all. Not until next season when Alabama takes the field.
Seemingly fresh. I mean, look at that. Back in LSU, winning a national championship, took a break in the NFL, went to Tuscaloosa, holding up that BCS crystal ball, eventually the CFP national championship trophy. There was a note here that Nick Saban, during his time in Tuscaloosa, had 44 guys go in the first round and only 29 losses overall. We've got the guys from the Cover 3 podcast joining us fresh off taping an emergency pod. It's Chip Patterson, it's Tom Fornelli, and it's Danny Cannell. Chip, I'm just going to start with you. Outside of the initial shock and awe, what was the dominant topic of conversation in your guys' emergency pod?
I would say that there was an appreciation for what Nick Saban has done for college football. On the Cover 3 podcast, what you get a sense of is what's true. We all love the sport. And Nick Saban has helped the growth of this sport at a very crucial time to where it has become, you know, right there second only to the National Football League. The way that he has taught everybody how to staff a modern college football program, how to recruit in the modern era, you know, what it takes to be able to be adaptable to different changes in the styles. I mean, Nick Saban has made college football better. He has raised the bar and he has made everyone chase them. And Danny has pointed out, not just today, but really for a while now, that the rest of college football has caught up to Alabama. And that's why we don't see anything quite like that run of 12 seasons where they won 6 national championships. But all of college football should be appreciative to Nick Saban and this Alabama run, because this time has forever changed the sport that we love so much.
Danny?
Totally agree. I would just echo, you know, the people that owe Nick Saban, Bama obviously elevating this program back to the top of the college football world. The SEC, since he took over, they've harped on how many national championships they've won as a conference, but when 7 of them have come from Nick Saban, he gets a ton of credit. Then you think about the SEC, who just inked a brand new deal with ESPN with a massive TV contract. The SEC owes him a debt of gratitude for what he's brought to them financially. And then the last one that I had forgot about, what about the players who are going to get a piece of the revenues? I know it's up in the air, but eventually they will get a piece of the money. They'll owe him as well, because he's elevated everyone, the college football brand, and all of them are going to get a share of it. So everyone should be looking at Nick Saban as somebody who shaped the sport to where it is right now.
You know, guys, it's been interesting as we take a look at most national championships by a head coach. Again, Nick Saban with his 6 at Alabama. You include the 1 with LSU. It's 1 better than Bear Bryant. We're getting things from our research team about his time in Tuscaloosa, where they were an underdog in 17 seasons at Alabama. They were underdogs just 13 times. The last championship coming in 2020. Tom, when you look at the dominance that everyone's talking about with Nick Saban, they were going into next season as the second betting favorite at 5-1. Those odds are now 10-1 right now. So what do you think of the Saban impact is reflective of the odds market?
I mean, I think, first of all, you start with the fact that he is the greatest college football coach of all time. So when you lose him, it's easy to think, oh, well, Alabama's probably not going to be as good next year. But I just also think that when you put in the unknowns right now, like the transfer portal is closed, but we don't know who the next coach is going to be. We don't know what kind of roster transition we could potentially see because of this, because there are so many dominoes yet that are going to fall, both from Saban leaving and who's coming in to replace him. So we don't really know what this team is going to look like. So it's not a surprise that the odds would change, because Nick Saban has been at Alabama for a very long time. I barely remember Alabama before Nick Saban at this point. So I think that when you look at the situation, like, the timing of it is, I think, somewhat poetic, in that we talked about on the show already how Nick Saban has kind of, you know, built college football and the key role he has played in turning it into the sport it is now, where to the SEC is one of the most dominant conferences in the country. And we have seen the college football playoff and the kind of the cult of the national championship that I think Nick Saban helped build. But now we're going into an era where there will be a 12-team playoff. We're looking at the future where there's going to be pay to play. Saban has been, kind of a vocal proponent of a lot of these things for years. And I think that now that we're finally heading there, for a coach that has been very he's evolved as the times have gone on. He's changed his approach to adapt to the changes. Now that we're getting the biggest changes of all, I think it's kind of fitting that he's stepping aside to let everybody else take over from here.
It's interesting. He likes to do some TV, does some commercials. I know he recently bought some property out in Jupiter, got some high-profile neighbors like Tiger Woods that he can lean on moving forward. Danny, I want to get back to you here because we had Brian McFadden on HQ Spotlight. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to ask BMAC this question because we were out of time, but both of you guys played for another legendary head coach in Bobby Bowden here. So what's the player impact, the residuals of what an iconic head coach can be? Because Saban, as I mentioned, had 44 first-rounders during his tenure there in Tuscaloosa.
I think it always goes back to the role that he plays that's bigger than just football coach. Life coach, father figure, the impact he's had on so many young men who have come through that program. And not all of them are going to be the Tua Tagovailoas, the Mac Jones, just go through a litany, Derrick Henry. I mean, you can just go through the laundry list of players who played for him or in the NFL, but a lot of players who didn't make it to the NFL but made it in life and have developed into successful businessmen, successful fathers, successful entrepreneurs, whatever it is. I think you can learn a lot from Nick Saban, the attention to detail, the importance of work ethic, of discipline, the character traits that he teaches you as a football coach also are carried off onto the real world. And I think that's the impact that's greater that we always don't talk enough about with some of these head coaches. And I'm sure Nick Saban is no different. And that's why I think you're going to see an outpouring of love and support. I know he's not going anywhere. We can discuss what he does next. But there will be players who look at Nick Saban and see him as a game changer for their life, who changed the course of their life because they were interacting with him, coached by him for those 4 or 5 years that they spent in Tuscaloosa. And it's really even bigger than his legacy as coach, is the legacy he's had on these young men's lives.
Nick Saban, fourth winningest head coach in Division I. Bobby Bowden was number 2. Also, most career bowl wins. It's Paterno, Bowden, and Saban. I'll let you guys go out, but before I do, we're going to go to Chip first and then Tom to wrap things up. Again, there's already been sort of a short list floating around there, Chip, about potential Saban replacements here. Talk me through some of the conversations you guys have already had and what fans should take away about what the Crimson Tide are going to do moving forward.
Sure, it's one of the best jobs in all of college football, but it is also an absolute pressure cooker. There is a list of names that are qualified, but they also have to consider whether they would leave what is a good position to be able to jump into that pressure cooker and be the guy after the guy. The two at the top of the list right now that I'm thinking of are Dan Lanning at Oregon, younger, early in his career. Do you want to stay there and continue to build as the Ducks make the move to the Big Ten? And then Steve Sarkisian at Texas. You are at Texas, and you were leading Texas into the SEC. Do you want to continue with what you've built right now? Those are both qualified coaches who fit the bill given their experience in the SEC and specifically at Alabama. But would they leave this job right now? It's a tenuous spot for one of the best jobs in college football. The other names, your Lane Kiffins and the like, maybe we would get to that point. Maybe they would say yes, but it's an interesting landscape shifting job change in college football.
Yeah, I think if you look at the situation, there's not a coach in the country really outside of maybe Jim Harbaugh or Kirby Smart who wouldn't at least pick up the phone if Alabama calls. Like, this is one of the preeminent jobs in the country, but one of the things you have to look at, like Chip mentioned, is it's a tough act to follow. Like, the guy won 6 national titles. He's the greatest coach of all time, and you're going to kind of step into that office. It's like, all right, go win more national titles. That's the job. But I do think there are a lot of coaches who can step into the job and be successful, and I don't think we're ever going to see another coach as successful as Nick Saban was in this 12-team playoff format, because it's going to be so much more difficult to win national titles. But if I had to just pick somebody who I think would end up getting the job, it would be a former assistant, whether that's a Steve Sarkisian or a Lane Kiffin. I think those are your primary targets.
Tom, Chip, Danny, thanks for doing a little bit of overtime joining us here on HQ after already taping an emergency pod on Cover 3. If you missed any of that, it was about 30 minutes that the guys were able to get done there. Again, Bud Elliott traveling, wasn't able to join them, but again, a nice, healthy conversation. Gentlemen, thank you. All right, here's a tweet from Coach Sark, Steve Sarkisian, saying the two GOATs would not be where I am today without these two men as mentors. Of course, he has connections to both men at USC, Alabama, of course, down in Austin, Texas. Just a couple of 72-year-olds, Amanda, separated by 6 weeks.
Deciding to hang it up?
Yeah, call it a career.
On the same day. You know, it's crazy. There was a tweet from Marlon Humphrey, and they're going to talk about this so much on the Cover 3 podcast. He said, I would have been in that portal so fast after I heard Saban was retiring, played there now at the Ravens. But you got to wonder, what is next for Alabama? Can they retain all those players they have right now with a new head coach coming in?
We could be here to talk about it all night, but Late Kick with Josh Pate going to take over at 7 Eastern. Check him out on YouTube. Of course, we talked about Dennis Dodd being out there in Pasadena. Really the last time we saw Nick Saban in that overtime loss at the Rose Bowl to Michigan.